This week, Glynn Loope joins us for an update on all of the challenges we're facing on the FDA regulations. In our Debonair Ideal segment for this evening, we're going to talk about how not to be an ash. John Reiner, the cigar surgeon, will join me this week for all of the festivities, including a look at this week's reviews, which will include cigars from Quesada, the Carolina Cigar Company, Island Jim, Aging Room, and Don Bernardo, and more. So stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Brought to you by, paying homage to the Mecca of tobacco, Pinar del Rio, Cuba, Abe Flores opened his PDR cigar factory in the Dominican Republic over 10 years ago. Abe is one of the hottest boutique cigar makers in the industry today, earning the number 10 spot on Cigar Aficionado's top 25 cigars of 2014 with the Abe Flores 1975 Serie Privada. Abe and his team use Cuban blending traditions in a modern boutique Dominican factory. Smoke PDR cigars and cut, light, and taste what they love to do. M. Bombay cigars represent the most admired cigar culture of Cuba. They select the best of the best quality tobacco to use in the aging process. M. Bombay cigars are then rolled in Costa Rica by some of the most experienced cigar rollers, giving it a unique smoking experience. The band portrays the detailed and artistic nature of our small industry. Try the M. Bombay Casera, M. Bombay Mora, and the recently released M. Bombay Habana. M. Bombay cigars, where the cigar is a way of life. I love that I get to smoke cigars and call it work.
Hey, Paul.
What's going on, cigar newbie?
I'm halfway through this cigar you gave me, and I was wondering if I could put it out and save it for later.
No.
Well, I wanted to try the Liga Privada with the Connecticut wrapper, and I was wondering where I could get some of those.
Yeah, so those don't exist.
Well, I also have some of the cigars you gave me from before, and I was wondering if I could store them in my refrigerator.
Only if you're going to eat them.
Don't be like Mark. Subscribe to Stogie Geeks Shorts with Paul and Will, a 10-minute show about all things cigar smoking. We provide tips and tricks on humidification, cigar storage, mini reviews on select cigars, accessories, and more. Stogie Geeks Shorts is one-stop shopping for learning about which cigars to smoke and the right way to cut, light, and store your favorite stogies. You can watch Stogie Geeks Shorts on our YouTube channel or subscribe using your favorite podcast app. For all the latest episodes, visit stogieshorts.tv.
Hey, Paul, this cigar is awesome, and I wanted to share it with you, and I was going to cut it in half.
Oh, boy. You need to watch Stogie Geeks Shorts. Welcome, everyone, to the Stogie Geeks Show. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, broadcasting live from the Villiger North American Studios in Rhode Island. Will is not with us this evening. He is actually in Cuba, which is very interesting. We look forward to his reports upon his return. I do have this week helping us out Mr. John Reiner, the cigar surgeon. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Paul. And it is a bit of a role reversal here to have Coop in Cuba and me on the show. I'm not quite sure how that worked out, but I'm happy to be here.
There's all kinds of crossing the streams going on.
Absolutely.
John is the host of Sharing Your Pairings. Is that correct?
Sharing Our Pairings, you got
Sharing Our Pairings, and which I've been on and Will has been on in the past. So John is a seasoned drinker and is starting out with some stout, I'm told.
Yeah, I'm going with the Evil Twin Brewing, which was a gift from a friend who came down to Calgary just this week, and it's the Even More Jesus. I don't know what that means, but it's 1 pint and it's 12% ABV, so things could get interesting on tonight's episode.
That's awesome. I'm starting out with a gin and tonic, and we've got this new tonic. It's called Spectacular Tonic Water, Q Tonic or something like that. I don't know. I bought it on Amazon because we kept stealing the Cigar Lounge's tonic, so I had to stock up on tonic. And it actually is very, very good. I like it better than the Canada Dry because I don't like people from. I mean, I love
What?
people from Canada. Canada's great.
No, I mean, you spend so much time worrying about the gin, you got to worry about the tonic too.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's an
That's right.
important product. Yeah.
I think this is Bombay Dry, which is one of my favorite gins. Now, I lit up a La Flor Dominicana La Nox for my cigar of the evening, which I love this cigar, and we weren't reviewing anything on the show, for this episode. So I went back to it, and it is just every bit as good as I remember. So what did you light up?
I went with the Cuatro Cinco Especial. So this is the 2015 limited edition, and I was a huge fan of the original release. I think they nailed it with the re-release, and something large enough that kind of would last the show and really stand up to the stout, and it's definitely standing up to the stout. So very in my happy place.
Awesome. Glynn Loope has joined us. He is here with us tonight. Glynn, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you.
Now, Glynn, what are you smoking?
See, you should never ask me that.
Okay, never mind.
No, I'm just kidding. I never talk about what I'm smoking because when you've got 65 corporate benefactors, they're all your favorites.
Mm-hmm.
But I am smoking a Florida Sun-Grown that
nice.
I purchased from our friend Jeff Borshowitz. So it symbolizes that cigar agriculture is alive and well in America.
That's excellent. Now, is that the new one from that J.C. Newman is distributing under the American brand, or is that a different Florida Sun-Grown?
No, it's a different one.
Okay.
It's the one I think he had before that.
I gotcha.
That tobacco is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
I just really admire Jeff's project and the farm that he's pulled together, and it does symbolize how it plays a role in the agricultural economy in this country. Like our friends in Connecticut and Pennsylvania do as well.
Yeah, I'm anxious to smoke some of the Florida Sun-Grown releases, as I think it's interesting. It's apparently a low yield tobacco, so it's very interesting.
Yep, it is, and I'm really enjoying it. I just got them just before last weekend from the mail from Jeff.
Awesome. So, Glynn, why don't you update us on the somewhat recently filed lawsuit against the major cigar, I would call them conglomerates, representatives of our industry to the FDA?
Well, the lawsuit was filed just before the trade show took place in Las Vegas, which was the objective, was making sure that we went into that show with the right type of information that the industry really needed and demanded at that particular time. So the lawsuit was filed in D.C. Circuit Court. It was filed against the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, and specifically the Secretary and Commissioner. It outlines basically a 9-point complaint. A couple of those complaints are specifically pertaining to the pipe industry and how erroneously the pipe sector was treated under the final rule. The other 7 pieces pertain to everything in terms of the world of cigars that we're seeking to protect. It goes into the fact that the Food and Drug Administration totally failed to conduct a proper cost-benefit analysis, an economic impact analysis, if you will, on the impact of this regulation on premium cigars. Which is required by the White House Office of Management and Budget and the regulatory process.
I was going to ask if that is in fact a requirement.
It is indeed, and they're actually required to take the path of least resistance, if you will, in terms of impact on the economy. This is labeled as a rule of economic significance, and economic significance is defined as over a $100 million economic impact on the national economy. That makes it a significant rule in the eyes of the administration and the bureaucratic process. That kind of tells you where we think we should have been characterized in terms of not only the impact on the domestic economy, but I've been very candid in using the terminology that we declared a trade war, that this rule declared a trade war on our Latin American trading partners in Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic, much less those countries that are strong suppliers of leaf to the industry, like Ecuador, Indonesia, Brazil, and Mexico. And now we throw into that mix Costa Rica. And we've met with every single one of these embassies in Washington, outlining our strategy, how we need them engaged in the process, how we need them to conduct outreach with the State Department in terms of the impact on their domestic jobs, much less what it means to our jobs here within the United States.
So is that $100 million number, is that an economic effect to the U.S. or all countries involved?
The U.S.,
Okay.
the U.S. economy. It would be, you throw in a multiplier effect, it would be much more than that if we threw in the internet. And also the rule, when it came out, noted that there are international trade consequences to the rule. Yet the final rule totally failed to address that in a proper fashion. In fact, it says noted impact on 2 foreign countries. Well, that shows how much homework the FDA put into this entire process. The rule also, the complaint also gets into the fact that, Congress told the FDA that if you regulate a product, everybody pays. Everybody pays into the user fee system, into this process for the honor and pleasure of being regulated. Yet they totally failed to assess the user fees on the e-cigarette sector that are also subject to the final rule. And that's a source of contention that we're raising with the courts. So it's very sweeping. We think it's very specific. We outline the constitutional grounds under the First and Fifth Amendment that we think that this rule violates. We go into several points of complaint, and our 3 sets of legal teams, I think, did an exemplary job of pulling together a rule that really, and this is a point that I want to make sure gets across, a complaint that benefits the large and small companies alike. It doesn't matter how small your company is or how large. This complaint, if successful in the courts, would work towards protecting your company.
And can you speculate as to how long the process for this legal action may ensue for?
Only on the front end of the process. The response from the FDA should be in around September the 15th. The part of that week, that would be approximately 60 days post-filing.
Because when you file a lawsuit, really in any court, right, there's an amount of time that they have to respond to that, correct?
And it is, and they've got 60 days. And then the judge will schedule a hearing, which I'm guessing would be sometime just prior to Thanksgiving. Mid-November, I would think, would be a projected time that we could anticipate a initial hearing to be scheduled in D.C. Circuit. Meanwhile, we're going down this parallel path that I'm sure you want to get into, but it's exactly the timing also of our last 5 months of this congressional session to also address this. But we'll let you get to that when you want to.
Yeah. So now the hearing that will likely be in November will just be for the opportunity for the FDA to issue a response, correct?
That's correct.
I gotcha. And then from there, who knows what happens, right? Then it's kind of...
Well, then we enter into a litigation phase with this, and our legal teams will be putting their heads together on the next steps after that, depending on the FDA response to the suit.
Right.
Glynn, I assume there's probably no expectation that the FDA is going to answer sooner rather than later. I would assume that they're going to take the maximum allowable time in every phase of this process.
Well, the week of September 15th is not that far away.
That's true.
And frankly, I've just kind of been using the e-cigarette case as a benchmark for this. They filed soon after the rule came out, and again, there was no magic to that. And there was no magic to the timing of our suit other than definitively a symbolic desire to make sure that there was a suit on the table prior to the trade show so that this industry knew how vigorously the effort was to defend it. But by the same token, if you just look back at what happened with the e-cigarette case, they filed the week after May the 10th. The FDA was given until August, I think 19th to respond. It was either 16th or 19th, and then their initial hearing is going to be either October 16th or 19th. So if you look at that time frame and kind of overlay it to us, the September to November time frame for us makes sense.
What kind of impact, Glynn, do you think that the vape side of thing is going to have for cigars? Like, if the vape industry makes any progress, does that help the cigar industry at all, or is it really being treated as a completely separate element.
Honestly, I hope it is being treated as a totally separate element. All we can look to them for is some type of symbolic, what the words I'm searching for. Um, are we going down a parallel path? Do we draw from the same areas of both the Constitution and the law to file a complaint? I've read some of the complaints that the e-cigarette industry has filed, and there are some similarities in language and tone and tenor to our suit. But I think it would be beneficial to us if we charted our own course, if you will. We're talking about things like a First Amendment violation where cigar boxes have to carry a warning label covering 30% of the packaging. Compare that to how even the cigarette industry is treated. In fact, that's the very first thing in our complaint, and I'm going to draw directly from it, how it incorrectly and impermissibly subjects newly deemed products, i.e. cigars, to stricter regulatory restrictions than originally regulated products. That would be cigarettes and smokeless. So in many ways, I've argued, and our legal teams have argued, that the FDA is proposing to treat us more harmfully than they do cigarettes and smokeless. I mean, the way if you make 1 trillion cigarettes, it's all the same cigarette, same chemical composition, same tobacco composition, it's the same everything. You make 100 cigars, all of them are different. That's the nature of being an all-natural handmade product. And the recognition of that, or shall I say the lack of recognition of that by the FDA, is one of the most telling commentaries of this regulatory process.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I think, from the beginning of talk of regulation, there's been a major disconnect, in the government, in the FDA, general public, whomever has looked at the situation in understanding the difference between the e-cigarettes and vapes, cigarettes and cigars. And that's been an ongoing problem, even if we look into the past, of how tobacco and now even non-tobacco products are being treated in terms of public health, is that failure to recognize that there are three completely different things.
Well, absolutely. And if you read the original deeming rule, I mean, it's the worst notion in the world. And that is the picture that they tried and diligently to paint, that cigars are nothing more than a path to nicotine addiction. Mm-hmm. And all of us know that nothing could be further from the truth. And they totally ignored the health data that we submitted with our public comment, documenting how premium handmade cigars simply do not carry the rates of inhalation and addiction that other tobacco products are purportedly to have. And if there had been any objective recognition of that whatsoever, we wouldn't be in the mess we are today.
Interesting. So you are actively still, obviously, seeking to educate the House and Congress, or in the Senate rather, about this issue. So there's things happening in that arena that are new?
Well, I wouldn't say new, but I would also say we probably are beyond the education phase in all of this. And I say that because I think we're in a much more political phase, and there's a difference. I mean, for the last 5 years, we've spent an amazing amount of time on Capitol Hill educating members of Congress, as you put it, about the fundamental differences between tobacco products, between all tobacco products, and depicting specifically how premium handmade cigars are different than absolutely anything that the FDA has had its eyes on. And we think that that's been a very successful campaign. If that weren't the case, 289 members of Congress wouldn't have signed on from the House of Representatives and 26 members of the Senate to a tobacco bill, of all things. And 72 of those members of the House voted for the original Tobacco Control Act, which clearly means that type of an education campaign, I believe, was successful. That being said, the reason I said I believe we're in a much more political phase of this is because, and I can't remember the last time we had this conversation, but on April the 19th was the date that the House of Representatives Appropriations Committee, alas, put language in the Appropriations Act that exempts premium handmade cigars, at least for the next year of the appropriations process, from FDA oversight, and also changes that predicate date. The fact that both of those pieces of language are alive today in that appropriations bill is incredibly significant. And we hope that the full House of Representatives will take action on that when they return from their recess next month. By the end of September, we hope the House puts an appropriations bill out there. That kicks in the phase of the Senate. And that's going to be an incredibly uphill battle. We're not pulling any punches about that. It's going to be a complex process, but we're going to be putting amazing pressure on senators, especially that have a huge vested economic interest in the success of the premium cigar industry, and that being the senators from Florida and Pennsylvania. So that would be, excuse me, Casey and Toomey of Pennsylvania, and Nelson and Rubio of Florida.
Mm-hmm. But now with the election coming up, a lot of those seats are going to change, and is there things that'll happen before the seats change, and then is there, obviously there's planning for once they do change.
Everything's this session. We
okay.
do not want to start this process over again under a new Congress or under a new president.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing you look for after a new presidency is what is the management of the FDA actually going to change.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an action that has to take place under this Congress, which means probably the smart money says there'll be some type of a continuing resolution or an omnibus budget package between the election and December 31st to keep the funded government the next year. That's where we need to be. We need to make sure that this language is protected going into that part of the budget process at the end of the year, because the Senate's not going to do anything until after this election.
Right. So it's really just protecting the progress that we've made this year until things change hands. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
So, yeah, there's going to be a new cast of characters, and we have to see how this thing is fought out, both in the courts and what we end up with on our plate as a result of the actions of this Congress. But we've got a lot of allies working for us in this Congress, both in the House and the Senate. September, well, we'll talk about this in a second, but we hope that cigar enthusiasts and cigar patrons, and as well as the retail community, are diligently working the grassroots efforts during the month of August when all these members are back in their states. And then during the month of September, we're going to be bringing manufacturers into Washington every single week to sell the message, principally in the Senate, but hustling the House to make sure they get a budget out.
Right.
So manufacturers of all the great cigar brands of the universe are going to be flowing in and out of Washington throughout the entire month of September on this.
But now, in terms of casting your vote in November, it's your congressional votes that probably carry as much weight or more weight than your presidential choice?
Well, that's a good question. We're going to be putting out, somewhat along the lines of your question, we're going to be putting out a voter guide, if you will, principally helping and highlighting those members of Congress that have diligently been on our side as co-sponsors of H.R. 662, and also been co-sponsors of our legislation for the last 3 sessions of Congress in whole.
Okay.
And because we want to stand by those members that have truly stood behind us throughout this entire legislative fight in both the House and the Senate. So that'll be coming up very, very soon, going into the proverbial Labor Day final leg kickoff of the election season. What happens with the presidency? There's going to be a transition period, no matter who wins. And that's the reason we issued our open letter to the candidates. And that open letter was included in that mix, was sent to Governor Johnson as the Libertarian candidate, because there's a lot of energy around that campaign. And there's a somewhat of a possibility he's going to make the debates if he can poll. I saw today the poll benchmark is officially 15% for him to get in the debates. So we issued this open letter to all the candidates. We're having that letter hand-delivered, which explains in great detail what the rule means economically, what it means to this country, what it means to our trading partners, what it means to us as cigar enthusiasts. And telling them basically, too, putting us in an electoral quantifier mode. Again, I use the term all the time, building cigar smokers up as a political constituency. And I very clearly in the first paragraph point out, if you want to carry the 29 electoral votes of the state of Florida and over 11 million registered voters in the state of Florida, you need to be talking to the cigar sector of the economy in the state of Florida, because to us, this rule declared war on that sector of the economy in Florida. This is $70 million in user fees that will not be flowing through the Florida economy if the federal government gets its hands on it. $70 million.
In just Florida alone.
Florida alone. That's not insignificant to the Florida overall economy. Excuse me.
I mean, that's not taking into account, again, the potential ramifications on an international stage and the potential money that might cause from destabilizing other regions economically. I don't think they've really taken that into account.
Incredibly well put, and the letter clearly goes into the implications of this on our trading partners. You're absolutely right. And then, so along those lines, last week with our friend Gabby Caffey with Caffey Cigars was in Washington for the Save the Leaf event. He and I had a meeting with Governor Rick Scott's office. Most of the governors have a Washington liaison office, so we met with the Florida office in Washington, representing the governor's office, and highlighted to them that $70 million figure that these user fees that will not be flowing through the Florida economy specifically as a result of this rule, much less the impact on entrepreneurs like Sandy Kobas and Little Havana and Gabby and the dozens upon dozens of others of manufacturers and brand owners, no matter how large or how small. If you take that corridor from Fort Lauderdale to Miami and the north of Tampa, that's cigar world. And you throw into that the infrastructure of the ports and the distribution channels and the like, you have this significant multiplier effect for the Florida economy directly as a result of the premium handmade cigar industry. So we've highlighted that to the candidates for president, but there will be this transition period. That's not going to stop the pieces of the rule, especially the most harmful pieces of the rule, from kicking in 2017. And so we've got to attack this thing on all fronts, whether it's the state economy, the international economy, the flaws of the rule from a legal context, and then our congressional and legislative action, all going on simultaneously. And we hope so. I hope that dramatizes to your listeners and viewers just how many balls are in the air by this industry to try to protect just one simple pleasure of a cigar.
And now there's also some user outreach that you're planning on doing as well, Glynn. Is that you have a plan for the rest of the year for reaching out to cigar smokers?
Yes, and I'm pulling up right in front of me what we issued. We issued this piece several times before the trade show and several times since, and we put it out again, I believe it was last Thursday or Friday. But it's basically a 9-point strategy, a 10-point strategy if you count the presidential letter. And it outlines to every consumer and retailer in the country and manufacturer what they ought to be doing during this August recess in terms of outreach. Because as I noted, everything that happens at the end of this year and with this budget process is going to be dictated with what happens right now. So we get into things like retailers and consumers reaching out to their individual congressional offices, because everybody lives within close proximity of their House or Senate offices for their members of the legislature. Inviting television, radio, and print media into cigar shops to let them see the impact of the rule and show how this is really a passion for discerning adults and let them visualize that themselves. Orchestrating throughout the month call-ins to the district offices for members of the House and as well as the Senate. We gave them speaking points. We gave them the exact language that was passed by the Appropriations Committee so that the proper plea can be made to protect that language in the House and the Senate. We brought in things that could be placed at the point of sale to drive up our petition. Our petitions to Congress have clicked over 103,000 since the rule came out, and that's whereas that's significant, it's clearly not enough if you take into account that there's probably a little over 3 million premium cigar smokers in the country. So we noted means as a multiplier effect to get that petition through many, many more channels through social media and the like, so that House and Senate members can hear them loud and clear. Because, we haven't been bashful about saying this. Every House and Senate member keeps a clear list of the yeas and nays. A lot of people like to question the impact of a petition. Well, I can assure you, if you live in a given state, in a given district, and you're an actual bona fide constituent, and you call about a controversial measure, and this could be characterized as such, they keep track of those yeas and nays. And cigar patrons across the country have been kind enough and diligent enough to actually send us back copies of the responses they've been getting from their members, good, bad, or indifferent. It is an eye into the portal of how these members feel about our issue. And I think that really, for the first time, really dramatized to me how psychologically we were getting through to the patrons as to the implications of this rule. When a cigar patron takes the time and the effort to email or fax us a copy of what their member of Congress said about this issue, to me, that was the sort of a breakthrough moment to depict how psychologically we were getting through as to the impact of these rules on just the average Joe cigar consumer who just had wants to have a solitude moment with a cigar. And then finally, as a component of this, we ask that patrons and retailers and the like distribute our open letter to the candidates for president to their local offices. I mean, I was reviewing them today. Trump and Clinton have field offices all over the country. And at the end of this week, many of us are going to be in Colorado for the Rocky Mountain Cigar Festival. And we're going to hand deliver this letter to the Colorado offices for the candidates while we're out there. We're doing the same thing in Florida and Pennsylvania and Texas, all the major states that these candidates have got to have and are diligently and actively campaigning in. So it's a communications game and making sure they know how our sector of the economy, how our constituency feels about what the FDA is proposing to do to this industry.
So, I mean, it's a call to cigar smokers, but also retail shops and lounges as well, as they are collections of cigar smokers to really help get the word out. And I think you've highlighted, Glenn, how this year is extremely important to protect our cause.
This is the last shot. This is the last shot with Congress. And with the timing of this final rule, with the timing of the litigation, this is the moment in time that cigar shops and patrons and lounges and cigar bars and those associated with the cigar economy get their message across right now. And it just baffles my mind sometimes, even when I see let's just call it apathy or the feeling that this won't happen to us type of thing permeates many sectors of this industry. And just now's the time not to be lazy about it.
And I think as a Canadian, I can certainly speak a little bit to that, and this is really a point I can't hammer home enough. This is the beginning. This is not the final step. This is the first step in a process that they will continue to erode cigar rights in the cigar industry. And if you don't make a stand now, 2 or 3 steps down the road, it will be impossible to make a stand.
I am so glad you said that. Because I throw it in every speech and presentation that I make to the industry, or no matter who will listen. You nailed it, and we've been very forthright in saying that. Well, we quote Mitch Zeller, the head of the FDA Center for Tobacco Products, when he stood in front of the National Association of Tobacco Outlets and said, "This is just the beginning." They're going to get into advertising and marketing restrictions, which could impact shows like this. They're going to get into distribution restrictions and regulations, and they're going to get into manufacturing practice standards, which will, again, more than likely attempt to drive up dramatically the cost of purchasing a cigar. There are dozens of ways that they can always make it worse, if you will. And so I'm so glad you made that point.
Yeah, and now is the time, and now is especially the time to stand up, as John and Glenn just highlighted that, this is just the beginning. So cigarrights.org, make sure you go sign up, get a membership, get the list of your congressional voting recommendations and information, and prepare yourself for November. Contact Congress in your representative districts is extremely important. All those, I think, really summarize the call to action here, Glenn. And I think if you're a retailer, there's lots of retail shops and lounges that listen. You're very much part of this process as well. It impacts you, and we need your help to reach the 3 million cigar smokers in this country to stand up for our rights. Very well put. Couldn't say it better myself. Excellent. Well, Glynn, thank you very much for coming on the show and giving us that update. I like that we kind of recharge our subscribers. Thank you. Appreciate your help and support, folks. As always. Thanks so much, Glenn. Thank you. Stay tuned. Demonator Ideal coming up next.